I'm in a league of my own. Y'all need to leave it alone. I'ma just eat everything. I'ma just leave you the bones. Call it an even exchange. There ain't no need to explain. Yeah, it should be overstood. Like when I hop on a plane and I fly over your hood. Y'all should be knocking on wood. Don't make me go against the grain. I ate my Wheaties, I'm good.
What is the deal, college football fans? What's the deal? It's your boy Kelly Flicks. I'm back for another episode of HBCU Flicks. This is, I want to say, week 5, and we are doing this. We are really doing this. So let's get into it. First up, we're going with tweets, as we always do. I got a tweet from the homie Dave. Dave from Panther Nation Podcast, North Carolina A&T Aggie through and through. Now, I'll add some context, but his question was, did Jackson State beat an FBS school? Now, let's add some context. I came out and said a couple days ago, I stopped caring about the FCS top 25 polls after Jackson State couldn't breach the top 5 because they don't play in the FCS playoffs. Jackson State was a top 3 caliber FCS program, but after one loss, finished at number 16 behind 7 teams with 3 losses or more. NCAA FCS. Shame on you. So let's get into it. Let's unpack all of this. So first off, what were you saying? Flicks, what were you saying with the can't breach top 5? All right, so Jackson State, the highest they got last year as undefeated in the regular season was number 7. They got as high as number 7. Now, here's my reasoning for stats top 25 not allowing them to finish in top 10 or even in the top 8. And the first reason is the fact that the top 8 seeds of the FCS stats poll have a bye in the FCS playoffs. Jackson State was not going to play in the FCS playoffs at any point last year. They were undefeated. As undefeated HBCU school in the SWAC or the MEAC, you are contractually obligated to play in the Celebration Bowl at the end of the season and not play in the FCS playoffs. The committee knows that. The writers know that. I think that's the exact reason why Jackson State was out of the top 10, well, at number 10 for a majority of the season, around 4 weeks, right? So let's continue to push the ball forward. Let's continue to push it forward. So the highest Jackson State was number 7. That was in week 6. In week 12, they got to number 10, right? Now, the biggest issue was the fact that Jackson State's strength of schedule was in question. So with the strength of schedule being in question, North Carolina A&T fans, if you aren't familiar, North Carolina A&T in 2017 made a run for the Celebration Bowl and was undefeated. I'll pull up some numbers for you guys and give you guys a very good look and good understanding of what North Carolina A&T did last year. But this is the main argument coming from North Carolina A&T side. Strength of schedule. They're saying that our strength of schedule was so tough that if you guys beat a team that was worth beating, you would be top 10 at the end of the season. And I beg to differ. North Carolina A&T fans claim to hang their hat on one game in particular, which is the Charlotte game. They beat Charlotte, who was 1-11, but Charlotte was an FBS team. I'm sorry. At 1-11, you one of the worst teams in the country. FBF, SCS, D2, I don't care. That don't help strength of schedule to me. Playing Division II Mars Hill, 3-7, doesn't help strength of schedule to me. Playing Gardner Webb, a regional matchup, who was 1-10, does not help strength of schedule to me. I'm sorry. As much as Jackson State's schedule may have been underwhelming last year, I don't feel as though this North Carolina A&T schedule was that much better than Jackson State's schedule. I honestly don't. Now, you could say, well, what hat what game could you hang your hat on? And yeah, you could question that. Sure, Tennessee State had a pretty good team. They fell off towards the end of the season. Didn't work out. Grambling was 3-8 last year. I can see your argument there, but arguing that Jackson State isn't a top 10 team in the nation in 2022 is out of the question. Now, in understanding that the FCS playoffs and their dynamics are much different, the last week of the FCS top 25 poll was 4 weeks before the week 12 poll, FCS week 12 poll. And in between that time, Jackson State did lose a game in the Celebration Bowl. In between that time, the 7 teams ranked above them, 6 of them won the first round game in the FCS playoffs. 1 of them did not. SEMO, Southeast Missouri State, didn't win. Now, Jackson State did lose to a ranked Celebration Bowl opponent in North Carolina Central, but we see that obviously to the voters and the writers that does not hold enough weight, and it holds less weight, in fact, than the FCS Round 1 matchup. Put that into perspective. So let's get into this playbook. I got the playbook for the week. What we gonna do, Flicks? We gonna talk about North Carolina A&T all day? I hope not. First off, we're gonna talk about my top 5 HBCU receivers. Who are the best HBCU receivers in the land? We'll dive into it. Delaware has found its quarterback 1, CJ Henry. 2 quarterbacks just transferred out, which seems to open up the playing field for CJ Henry to be the guy. We'll talk about North Carolina Central and their schedule update. They have back-to-back Thursday night games in the middle of October, so we got to talk about that. And then lastly, we'll get into the SIAC corner. As I always do, we'll dive into Allen's air raid attack and get a look at David Wright and what he can do in his return to Allen. So first up, let's get into my top 5 receivers. Go ahead, screenshot, do what you got to do, make it happen. But my top 5 receivers is out. This is it. Casey Hawthorne is definitely one of the guys that I think of first when you think about top receivers in HBCU football. Last year, what he did for Howard was basically everything. He did anything. He was the Wildcat quarterback for them, and he was the go-to guy, one of the go-to guys at wide receiver. Last year, he had 31 receptions for 293 yards. But dig this, he had 43 rushes for over 200 yards last year. So Casey Hawthorne is the playmaker that that Howard has on the field. Casey Hawthorne, to me, is a wide receiver 1. I think that he will take the next step this year in his route running and really being a safety valve for Quinn Williams. I think that he explodes for a major year. I think that just through the spring game, we saw a glimpse of how often Quinn Williams may look for Casey Hawthorne. And if it's even that close, that was around 4 targets within 50 plays. If it's even that close, if that's our sample size, I'm buying in on Casey Hawthorne at this point in the season. I think he's going to be a great player this year for the MEAC and probably one of the top wide receivers in the MEAC. Moving on from a top player in the MEAC, let's talk about a top player in the SIAC Division II. Jaquez Jones is the guy. He was on my stock up this past year because he has been playing lights out. It's nothing. There's too many good words I can say for Jaquez Jones, to be honest. He's playing on a lane team. They're going to switch up their quarterbacks. I don't believe Michael Huntley is returning this year. So he'll have the chance to get acclimated with a new quarterback that will definitely know his name. This is a guy that had 50 receptions for 917 yards last year, 11 touchdowns. He had the most receiving yards of any HBCU receiver that is returning. Put things in perspective for you. This guy, Jaquez Jones, went for 7 catches and 152 yards against Central State. He went for 5 catches for 150 yards against Miles. He's easily the most underrated wide receiver in HBCU football. Please stop overlooking him. I think this year he puts everybody on notice. He can even reach a 1,000-yard season within 11 games in the SIAC schedule. Jaquez Jones, he accumulated the most yards received by HBCU player. His top-end speed leads him past defenders. He kept Lane in plenty of games last year. With his game-breaking ability, he is your deep threat. Now, going on from one deep threat to another, let's talk about Lyndon Rash. Grambling has their fair share of playmakers, and Lyndon Rash is one that is returning for them. Lyndon Rash, I think he's naturally a deep threat, but in Grambling's offense, he went for 32 catches on 517 yards last year. He caught a lot of underneath routes, and they got him the ball at or near the line of scrimmage, which was, I think, was an indictment on their passing game. I think this year you add Miles Crawley, a guy with a big, strong arm, veteran experience. He's going to be able to get Lyndon Rash the ball downfield whenever he wants to. That's kind of the way Miles Crawley gets down. Now, with Lyndon Rash, I think that we haven't seen the best of Lyndon Rash. We saw some glimpses of him. I think this year we see him unchained. Now, going from Lyndon Rash, let's go into some of the other good guys, man. But let's get into another SIAC product, and that's Antonio Meeks. He has some very big game-breaking ability. This guy, some of his stat lines, I inquire you to go check out his game. Some of his stat lines are ridiculous. Against Benedict, he caught 3 passes for 176 yards. That was the number 1 team in D2 HBCU football. 3 catches, 172 yards. Against Kentucky State, he caught 6 catches for 212 yards. I think you're starting to understand why Tuskegee made it to the SIAC championship. Antonio Meeks, as a freshman, showed his downfield ability, catching the ball, high pointing the ball over guys, and running past a lot of guys. So really what I've noticed with Antonio Meeks, even though he's a young guy, he has pretty good size at around 6'3", 220 pounds. A lot of times he muscles a lot of defensive backs when the ball's in the air. He takes the ball from guys. You got to love it. I think he's another very underrated receiver in college football. Man, he has great speed. I think coming back, he has Bryson Williams as his quarterback this year. He'll maintain that connection and stay reconnected with his boy. I think we're looking at another big year for Antonio Meeks. His big frame really gives him a lot of ability when playing against a lot of these other Division II teams. Looks good. I think we're in for another monster year. This past season, he caught 31 catches for 692 yards. Now imagine what he would do with 50 catches. Just a thought. Lastly, let's get into Marcus Riley. Marcus Riley is a game-breaking receiver, a transfer from Bethune-Cookman to Florida A&M. Transfers to his rivals. Now, Bethune-Cookman is in a little bit of flux. They lost some of their top offensive threats last year, and a change of scenery might be what's right for Marcus Riley. And I think that this change of scenery is actually the best fit for Marcus Riley. I think Marcus Riley is going to really exceed expectations at Florida A&M. Florida A&M, since Xavier Smith has left, obviously is looking for a wide receiver 1. As good as John Marie Shareed is and David Manigo, I think John Marie Shareed is going to be a gadget guy. He'll be on my gadget list. But I don't think he moves into wide receiver 1 role. I think Marcus Riley moves into the X role. I think he becomes wide receiver 1 for Florida A&M and a go-to guy for Jeremy Musa. He was a go-to guy for Jalen Jones last year at Bethune-Cookman and really became a safety valve when Kamari Averett got lost in the mix. I think that Marcus Riley takes another step this year. He did pretty well on the Bethune-Cookman team. That was not very good. He had some breakout games of 160 yards against Prairie View A&M. He ends the season with 39 catches for 563 yards. Marcus Riley is my pick to be one of the breakout players in the SWAC this year. I don't see any reason why this speedy receiver doesn't make noise at Florida A&M. That's what Florida A&M does. Their receivers are all speed. They're the rack boys for a reason. He fits right in, and this could be very scary for the SWAC if they don't take notice or game plan accordingly. These are my top 5 wide receivers. Other 2 notable receivers, Devin Smith, North Carolina Central, a leader out there. He did a great job throughout the season. And another guy, Rashad Bobo Jordan, Albany State. Now, anybody else that was looking to hear their name called or didn't hear their name called, I did have a couple caveats on this list. And one was to be a top 5, one of my top 5 receivers, you have to have at least one game with 100 receiving yards. If you can't have 100 receiving yards in a game, what makes you the top guy? It's about top performances put together. Something to think about. Now, let's get into my top 5 gadget players. I got some gadget players that are dogs, and these gadget players are athletes. They play running back, wide receiver, possibly even quarterback. And really with these gadget players, what we're seeing a lot in college football now is the increase of quick, fast-footed guys that just get on the field. They almost are positionless, right? You can use them in the special teams. You can use them on offense. Hell, sometimes you can use them on defense when it's Hail Mary. But in looking at gadget guys, my top guy is John Marie Shareed, Florida A&M. He does his thing in special teams. He does his thing on offense, punt return, kick return. He's a super threat. He ended the season with less than 500 yards receiving, but all-purpose yards, he has 826. He's a guy you got to have on your team, a guy that's almost irreplaceable. A lot of these gadget guys become irreplaceable in offenses that need big plays. And I think John Marie Shareed is part of the reason why Florida A&M's offense goes. So he is my top HBCU gadget player. We'll get into another top player, and that's Jakeem Smith. Jakeem Smith finished with a 77 Pro Football Focus grade. That is the highest grade of any HBCU receiver that is returning. Jakeem Smith is a very small frame guy, around 5'10", like 180 pounds, if that. Super quick guy, but he's a deep threat. He attacks the seams. When I say a guy can take the top off, this guy takes the top off. Another year with rapport from quarterback C.J. Henry could prove valuable for this top-end wide receiver. I have him as one of my gadget guys because he takes a lot of jet sweeps. He catches screens in the red zone. I noticed Delaware State gives Rakeem Smith the ball a lot in the red zone. They make the defense tackle this little dude, and they have a hard time tackling him. He's so elusive. I'm very high on Rakeem Smith, and I think he'll be a great asset to his Delaware State team and a really good asset to Lee Hull and his new offense. Let's get into Eden James, staying in MEAC. Eden James out of Howard looks to be on pace for a game-breaking year. Last year, he didn't have any receptions. In the spring game, he catches a ball for 45 yards. Last year, he rushes the ball 70 times for 406 yards. 2 touchdowns. I think that was only the beginning. For a freshman to get that type of look shows that the offense and offensive coordinator trust you. As a running back, that's big, especially when you have a running back 1 back there in Jared Hunter. So I think Eden James solidified his position in this backfield last year and is now primed for an even bigger role this year on the receiving side. He's one of my top gadget guys because not only does he have top-end speed, he is very hard to tackle. This guy runs hard, okay? He's a little guy, but he runs hard. And when you have a guy like that, you just want to give him the ball as much as possible. And I'm sure that Coach Larry Scott and Eden James are going to eat this season for Howard. So another running back that I got my eyes on is Nico Duffy. This guy is a running back wide receiver. I was told that he was making the transition to wide receiver this spring. He was once the top running back at Alcorn State. He was on pace to break almost all of Alcorn's rushing records until this guy named Jarvian Howard comes into the fold and rushes for 1,200 yards last year. So now Nico Duffy is a spell back. As a spell running back, he's getting more receptions. He's moving around more as in a gadget fashion. And I've also been told that he's been moving more to receiver. So in understanding that he can catch the ball, he's already 6'1". He's around 200 pounds. He has the size of a receiver. With his frame and his look, he could get the ball even more often in times where Jarvian Howard and the box is packed. I think that Nico Duffy has a definite shot to be a breakout candidate this year in the SWAC. And because of the situation that he's in for a consecutive year, I think Nico Duffy understands his role and executes perfectly. I think this Alcorn State team is going to have a great year this year, and I think that part of it is going to be predicated on how Nico Duffy plays. And then lastly, it's getting to Seven McGee. This is our newcomer on this list. He doesn't have many stats. Last year he played for Oregon, and at Oregon he only had about 200 yards, 166 yards, all purpose, right? You tie in everything, the receiving, the rushing, the return, that's all he had. Now, for this Jackson State offense, this is going to be a totally different ball game. I think Coach Maurice Harris knows exactly what he wants to do with Seven McGee. I mentioned last week about this recruit they're just bringing in named Jaden Bosey. Jaden Bosey is another one of those guys that plays similar type of style as Seven McGee, a running back that has great receiving ability and also has great balance. You're going to need a guy with great balance if you're going to give him the ball every now and then. If you're only giving him the ball 10 to 15 times a game, he's going to need great balance. And with Seven McGee, to me, he is naturally a running back with great hands. And as a running back with great hands, you naturally understand rushing lanes. And as a quick guy with a coach that likes to use gadget receivers, it's a match made in heaven. I think Seven McGee does great things for Jackson State this year. I think that he can definitely run for about 400 yards, and I think he can really catch the ball for about 300 yards, if not more. We'll look even further into his season, and we'll make sure we follow up with these guys. But of my gadget receivers and players, Seven McGee is definitely one of my favorite. Now, the 2 guys that didn't make the list but are really close were 2 quarterbacks, in fact. A quarterback athlete, Christian Peters out of Shaw University. He does it all at quarterback. He even plays receiver. And another guy, Larry Williams, the Wildcat quarterback of Bowie State University. Another great player. So I was speaking about Jakeem Smith and what Jakeem Smith can do for Delaware State. So let's get into Delaware State's offense, man. Delaware State's offense is becoming a little high-powered. They have a bunch of small, quick dudes. I mean, I swear the whole offense is under 6 foot, but they all quick as hell, right? You got C.J. Henry, who just took up the starting quarterback spot. He moves Jared Lewis and Tylik Bethune. He moves them out of the picture. They just hopped into the transfer portal. C.J. Henry seems to be the guy at quarterback. Last year, he threw for 1,000 yards. It's pretty good completion percentage at 63% completion, and he has 9 touchdowns. So he played every game of the season, almost every game of the season. He was healthy for most of the season, and the numbers were a little low. I will say, just because of Delaware State and their play last year under Coach Milstead, they lost players mid-season. It was a shit show. I'm sorry, it was a shit show. But moving into this season with Coach Lee Ho, I think C.J. Henry arrives. I think we are still waiting for the arrival of C.J. Henry, and last year his efficiency showed us just a tablespoon of his talent. Now he returns with Jakeem Smith. Also have Connor Blunt down there at receiver, and most importantly, you return your star running back, Marquise Gillis. I think C.J. Henry has every weapon around him to succeed, and I don't see a reason why he can't succeed. Now, there will be questions about size of this Delaware State team, and that will take Coach Lee Ho time to understand and figure out how to make this work. But I do think as far as an explosive offense, this is what an explosive offense looks like. When you have one of the top receivers ranked by Pro Football Focus on your offense, you have a great quarterback and one of the top running backs in HBCU football, you have a chance offensively. No matter if there's a flex year, if there's new coach, you still have a chance because the talent is on the field. I do think that it would be a tall task in trying to replace Jairus Halsey and their other senior receivers. But when you think about a guy like Rakeem Smith, he has the potential to break out and be even better than Jairus Halsey, in my opinion. And I think that if you continue to feed him the rock, keep him healthy, he's your guy. You can make him your Xavier Smith. Why not? I look forward to a big year out of Marquise Gillis. As I mentioned, the running back, last year he rushed for 112 yards, for 545 yards, 5 touchdowns. A modest year, but I think he's definitely a 1,000-yard running back. I look to see that moving forward. So let's get into something that's been weighing on me low-key. We got this new back-to-back Thursday night game, right? So North Carolina Central has been tabbed for 2 back-to-back Thursday night games. I think this is the only back-to-back Thursday night game for any team across FBS to FCS. I don't think anybody else is doing this with North Carolina Central. Definitely an experiment. But there are 2 different ways to look at this. You can look at this and the effects on the brand, that is North Carolina Central, and you can look at it from the effects on the team and the players involved in the week-to-week process of playing football. So first, if you look on the effects of the brand, this season, they are amidst a title run. Let's keep it real. North Carolina Central is the favorites to win the Celebration Bowl going into 2023 season. And as the potential favorites, you want to get on TV as much as possible. So I went through their schedule and checked out some of their games. So the North Carolina A&T game is going to be on Flow Sports, so that will not be on national television. You won't get that exposure. But they do play at UCLA in week 3, a week where a lot of FCS and FBS opponents play. Possibly they may have a look at a national televised game there. But next, you have your 2 Thursday night matchups. These matchups I do not like very much are looked at as possibly nationally televised. Last year, North Carolina Central and Morgan State played on ESPN2 for North Carolina Central's nationally televised game during the regular season. They had another one for Celebration Bowl. So that's from a brand perspective, right? And even pushing the brand perspective even farther, you look at the last year's Celebration Bowl favorite, Jackson State, and how many nationally televised games they had. They had 3, but they only had 1 during the regular season. And that was in game 1 for the Orange Blossom Classic against FAMU. The other 2 games, nationally televised games, came in the postseason, SWAC Championship and the Celebration Bowl. Let's look at that from a brand point of view. Let's look at it from the effects on a team. How does this affect a team day to day? Well, first of all, playing Thursday night games throws off the schedule of a football practice. If you think about normal football practice, there's a game on Saturday, you usually off on Sunday. Some people practice on Sunday. You go a little slow on Monday, probably just shirts and shorts, maybe just film. Tuesday, you hop out there, you probably shills, shorter pass shorts. Wednesday comes around, you probably shoulder pads, shorts, if that. You may go full pads, but go half contact, stuff like that. But when this Thursday schedule, after coming off a Saturday game, Sunday you're probably off, Monday you're probably off, Tuesday you probably have practice, Wednesday you're doing walkthroughs. So, and looking at this on how it affects a team could be a little tricky. It could lead to issues against Morgan State. You have a short week against Morgan State, your opening of the MEAC season, and this Morgan State team is thirsty. They hungry. They got some new dogs. We don't know who's going to be their quarterback at this point in the season, so they're wobbly. You got to watch them. But going into this next game, the second Thursday night game, from a team perspective, isn't that bad. You're actually going to get more rest than South Carolina State will. You're going to have 7 days off compared to South Carolina State, who plays against Delaware State on 10/21, 5 days prior to South Carolina State's game against North Carolina Central. You have the advantage in rest against South Carolina State. And even think about this. The week after that, you have the advantage of rest on the next team you play. Because now you have 8 days of rest. Because if you play on Thursday, you get Friday, Saturday, Sunday off. So from a team perspective, this could be a little tricky. It does present different challenges and different hurdles because I, for one, have not seen a back-to-back Thursday slate for any team in college football. And for two is you got to monitor injuries. And even in trying to manage your injuries later in the year, you want to have less practices. This North Carolina Central team probably won't practice much between these 2 weeks, which is good for your injured guys and good for getting guys back to full health. So I don't like the idea of this schedule, this back-to-back Thursday night schedule. I'm not a fan of this at all. It should be the last time this ever happens. I'm over it. But if this gives North Carolina Central a chance to be on national television, I'm all for it. Because if you really take a look at it, ESPN has already said they're going to air Syracuse at Virginia Tech on 10/26. That's the same day that South Carolina State and North Carolina Central play. Right? Be mindful of that. But ESPN has not yet announced a Thursday night game on October 19th, other than North Carolina Central and Morgan State. So possibly that could be their chance to get a national televised game. If anything, I hope that through this weird scheduling, Central at least ends up with a nationally televised game. So moving over North Carolina Central and what they have going on, we're going to get into our SIAC corner. Like we always do, we'll get into Division II football, and we'll talk about the SIAC. Last year, Allen University went 2-8. It wasn't the best season. It was a season filled with injuries, and things changed. David Wright was injured in week 5 of the season. Michael Reese, quarterback of Allen, took over and didn't play too bad either. But David Wright is definitely the catalyst at quarterback. So this team is pretty exciting. I'll read a couple numbers for you. Okay, so David Wright, before he was injured, threw 93 passes for 100 and on 55 passes. I said that a little wrong. David Wright had 93 completions for 1,049 yards. He had 5 touchdowns. Jaden Horace, these receivers, this trio of receivers is what is the problem. Okay, this air raid with great receivers is tough. So you got Jaden Horace, 47 catches, 706 yards. Armand Harris, 39 catches, 517 yards. And you got Jamal Jones, 37 catches, 350 yards. One of my top receivers on my top 5 list, Lyndon Rash, only had 32 catches last year, to put that in perspective. These guys throw the ball. They throw the ball all around the park. Allen gets the ball up, but it allows them to play close with every big team in the SIAC. Play Benedict extremely close because of this. What Allen is lacking on defense, they make up for on offense with scoring and production. The offense keeps the defense off the field. As bad as the defense may have been at times, this offense kept them off the field long enough to win a couple games. And moving forward, I think this Allen team really is starting to create a blueprint for success. Quite honestly, this Allen team is one of the best offensive teams within the SIAC. Last year, they were number 3 in scoring, number 1 in pass completion percentage. They're pretty high for passing touchdowns also. That usually does not end up in a 2-8 season. I think mostly what had to do with that was the fact that David Wright went out. They only won one game while he was playing. Only won one game when he was out. I think with a full slate, 10 to 11 games, David Wright may get into rhythm and may become even more dangerous than we previously assumed. Allen University and in the SIAC is the Wild Wild West. There is no East and Western division anymore. It's all about beating conference opponents. How many can you beat? And in my opinion, Allen University has a chance to win 6 games this year coming up. They lost so many close games last year. So many buzzer-beating games last year. Losing by 2 points, 3.7 points. It happened to Allen last year. Similar to what happened to Benedict a year ago before their SIAC championship. They were a team that went 5-5. They lost a lot of very close games. They started off 5-0, ended up 5-5. Lost a lot of close games. But the next season, they won the SIAC championship. I'm not sure if Allen's going to win the SIC championship this upcoming year, but they are definitely on this trajectory with this core of players. I'm convinced Allen has a good chance. So that's been my episode this week of HBCU Flicks. I also want y'all to tap in with MMM, Money Moan Media, and she talks about WNBA basketball every Saturday. Don't forget to tap in with her. Don't forget to tap in with Bet on Black that comes on live every Friday. Keep your post notifications on. And HBCU Flicks, as you know it, drops every Monday. Thanks everybody for tapping in with me. I appreciate the love and support. I look forward to talking to you guys about what I just talked about on my show, because this A&T and Jackson State shit got to stop. Shame on you. Talk to y'all next time. Peace.